back to another episode of Greenlit. Today I'm chatting with producer Rob Barnum. Rob's produced a number of projects with Bondit over the years, including On the Line with Mel Gibson, Ida Red, Body Brokers, Night Hunter, and The Con is On with Uma Thurman, which was one of the first larger projects Bondit worked on 5 or 6 years ago. Rob's a pretty exciting independent producer, having ridden multiple waves of the independent film movement over the last 20 years or so. Rob is a hands-on producer, dealing both with cast as well as logistics on set, but also has a really great mind around all things distribution and finance. Whether working with Megan Ellison and her company Annapurna on projects like Zero Dark 30, The Master and Her, to the wave of projects like Margin Call that really broke out at Sundance and were some of the last projects before the streaming movement took control of the independent film sector. So without further ado, enjoy this episode of my discussion with Rob Barnum. Rob, thanks for taking the time, dude.
Hey, my pleasure. Nice to be here.
So I'm going to let you sort of set a bit of the stage. I know we've worked together a bunch over the years and known each other for the better part of the time I've even been in the business for the last 10 or 12 years. And by the time we connected, you had already had things up and running for quite some time and had a pretty great reputation, certainly in the independent space, even with some of the bigger independent companies that were being built out at that time. But maybe just for the listeners to set the table a bit, just a 30,000 foot view on you and how you got into the business and what was sort of that first project getting up and off the ground that really made the way forward.
Sure, yeah. Well, actually, I got into the business originally as a writer, and I, due to other people's bad taste and my good fortune, optioned a screenplay away when I was 21, and thought for sure I was like the next Ben Affleck, Matt Damon. It was all happening. And that movie never got made, but we had various times. At one point we had like Mark Ruffalo attached. This was, mind you, this is like 2005, right? It's a while ago, and Brian Cox, but no one ever got the movie made. But yeah, so I just started coming out of college. I just started going to film festivals and meeting as many people as I could, crashing parties and just networking and managed to actually, sync up with a couple of guys, Sharam Das and Kevin Frakes from Palm Star Entertainment way back then. And then coming out of the Silicon Valley world, which was my background pre-film, like I was one of those college tech guys, we started a distribution company trying to do day and date distribution well before it was anyone's good idea.
Yep.
And so the company was called Anywhere Road. We did a lot of movies with Red Envelope, which I don't know if you remember, but it was
the Netflix releasing.
Right. Yeah. Netflix's distribution arm. And that was back when Netflix paid you like 50 cents per turn every time somebody ordered a DVD. Well, before streaming. So, that was cool. And we did that for a few years until I realized that like aggregating content, I didn't really have that much of a passion for any of the movies that we were actually distributing. So we sold that company to Echo Bridge. I don't even know if they're around anymore. And
I hear their name, I think, from time to time.
Yeah, I mean, this is like DVD time, right?
Yeah.
This is very nascent streaming, well before this world that we now live in, right? And so from there, I kind of went into producing. And was very fortunate that one of my early films was Margin Call, which ironically is having a resurgence recently as the banking industry,
the world melts. Yeah,
it's like, did we learn nothing? And but even the funny thing with Margin Call, we had that amazing cast and the number of people who were attached to it that weren't in the final version just because of scheduling. I mean, you had Ben Kingsley at one point. You had I'm blanking on his name. Tim, Bull Durham. Tim
Robbins.
Tim Robbins. Thank you. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Uma Thurman. I mean, there was just a lot of different people. Carla Cugino. So I mean, obviously the script spoke to actors, but we actually, we got that into Sundance as like, Cassie and Elway's kind of pushing it through. It was, we weren't in competition. It was, a premiere. And then they gave us like a Tuesday premiere, if I remember correctly, of the second week. It was like not when you want to be trying to sell a movie. So we
Yeah,
actually do a buyer's screening, not like the Eccles premiere or whatever, on the first Saturday while people were still in town. And and I like really, not a lot of people wanted it. It came down to it was we were dealing with that. It was Schumann back when he was at Sony. I think it was, yeah, Sony, but not Classics. And then obviously Roadside Attraction. And so anyway, and Roadside ended up, acquiring the film. And then we had like the greatest viral marketing campaign of all time, which was Occupy Wall Street.
right.
And we laugh because like that movie very easily could have been just another one of the
Yeah,
hundreds of films that are released day and date, and nobody would have, maybe people would have noticed, but like the timing of releasing that movie when Occupy Wall Street happened, it was for a while there the largest grossing day and date film of all time. I think it got surpassed by that Richard Gere film.
oh yeah, Collateral.
Not Collateral. It was the other banking one. A few years later.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
Kevin Turin produced it.
Rob, for a second, just to go back just for a moment, how did I know JC Chandor, obviously you worked with him again on All Is Lost. How did Margin Call come to you guys? And in what stage was it by the time you had read it? And did it read like it was going to be just unbelievable?
So when I got it from Cassian.
Okay.
When he had just left William Morris and he'd set up shop over at Untitled. He had a desk there. And a mutual friend had said, you and Cassian would make an interesting team. Of course, we ended up having a partnership for years. But when I went and I met with him, and he slid me this script, which Zach Quinto was a client, and it was his production company before the door. And at the time, they had Zach and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. That was and Zach was actually going to play the Simon Baker role at that point, and Joe was going to play Zach's role. And I had taken it to Michael Benaroya, who I had known his dad through my Silicon Valley world. And, he had reached out and said, hey, my son's getting into film financing. And it was funny because Mike had actually seen the project from UTA and had passed. So his poor head of development, had some real egg on his face when it went on to become an Oscar-nominated screenplay. But that early version of the script, I mean, it was pretty much what we shot, other than like there were some of the bigger monologues, like the the Jeremy Irons monologue at the end of the movie. That was not in the original script. And Bettany, Paul, there were a couple of things written for actors, right? Like as the cast built, you wanted to, give some juice to it. And JC's obviously incredibly talented. And one of the things that I love about JC, and when you look at all of his movies, but specifically those two, Margin Call and All Is Lost, is as a filmmaker, he really embraces that, like, you don't need backstory, right? And one of the big criticisms of Margin Call was we don't know anything about these guys. Like, we just have this 24 hours, like who's got a wife, who's got a kid, all this stuff. Like you get some of DC's life, but and obviously in All Is Lost, you have no context for why Robert Redford is lost at sea, right? But as a storytelling, mantra or whatever, JC, his point is you don't need it. Like you need to care about the person in this moment, right? What's happening to them in this moment. And I think it's a really cool way of telling a story, right? And like I just shot this movie called Kalahari with Ryan Phillippe and Emil Hirsch, and it's like the plane crash in the Kalahari Desert and lions versus man. And one of the notes on that was like, well, we don't know anything about these people. Like, give us some more background. And you're like, but do you need to really know their whole life story to understand that like they're trying to survive, right? And so I think it's a fascinating thing to look at,
And so with Margin Call, was it immediately after Sundance you knew it was going to be a hit, or it took some time to snowball with, like you said, things like Occupy Wall Street, and then the momentum of the movie built? But it was sort of streaming flattening the industry in many ways, and pre really social media being this incredible megaphone. Yeah, social media was there, but it wasn't this incredible micro targeting or this ridiculous amplification that it is now. What was
Totally.
the moment or series of moments that made that movie become? Because I remember obviously entering the business, and that movie was a very big deal. Like it was everywhere. It just felt like one of those independent movies that everybody knew, and it was really this sort of lighthouse, if you will, of people coming into the business in terms of where you wanted to point ship to what you
Yeah.
wanted to be making.
Yeah, it actually really, it wasn't until the movie was released, to be honest. Like it was, we sold it. It was a couple of weeks after Sundance. By the time the deal got done, it wasn't a big splashy $20 million acquisition. And it was just, marketing campaigns and fighting over posters. And we went to Berlin right afterwards, which was pretty cool, to have the movie in Berlin. And getting to watch Jeremy Irons dance in a nightclub one night. That was hilarious. And I mean, it was such a cool, given the size of the cast, which was both a big cast but a very intimate cast, and the way we shot the film, there were no trailers or anything. We used the executive offices on the 41st floor of One Penn Plaza where we filmed, and it had a very theater vibe to it. Like everyone was just kind of hanging out, and then so we did Sundance, we did Berlin, and so it was special in that sense, real like bonding experience for everybody. But yeah, I mean, it was really, again, it was like Occupy Wall Street, the greatest, viral marketing campaign in history. I mean, tip of the hat to Lionsgate.
Right.
Figuring that out. But so there was a bit of luck. And, it's the funny thing, about our business is the luck factor, right? I always say somebody had their movie released the first weekend after September 11th, right? And, obviously it tanked and nobody was going out anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So there is a randomness to the success of a movie, I think sometimes, right? Where it's like independent movies, right? Not like Marvel or what have you.
Sure.
But like, there's so many factors that there's no model to back that into, right?
Right.
And in the like external life events, again, like Margin Call could have come and gone and been like a really compelling story, but then Occupy made it zeitgeisty,
Right.
And again, even now, it's like people, with the current banking situation, people are watching it everywhere.
Yeah.
So,
and Rob, what was the through line then going from Margin Call into All Is Lost? How did that come about? Was the relationship then just so established with JC, and was again, I know we'll get into some of the Annapurna stuff and various companies that you've worked with along the way. Just walk me through how that line got thread between those movies, because they were pretty close back to back, if I remember. And I remember actually seeing All Is Lost in a screening in Cannes. I don't even know what year that was, and just being totally blown away by it. I was really early to the business, and I just couldn't believe there's almost no spoken word. There might actually be no spoken words, right? And it's just unbelievably good. But walk us through that through line in terms of how A to B.
Yeah, so it's actually funny. It goes back to when we wrapped on Margin Call. We were sitting on the roof of Washington Square's office. They had this roof deck in New York, and having a drink. And it was me, Neil Dodson, and JC. And JC made a joke about how the next script that he writes is going to have one fucking actor, and we laughed. We were like, oh, because the scheduling was such a nightmare. We shot Margin Call in 3 6-day weeks. I mean, it was just to fit all those actors in, and the budget that we had was only a $3 million film.
It's pretty remarkable. Like that works for a low budget action movie, but that's really hard to think you shot that movie like that.
Yeah, but it was great because we were shooting all nights because it was a fishbowl, and so it kind of worked that everyone really was exhausted, right? It sort of, in the movie there's supposed to have been an all-nighter, and we were doing these all-nighters where everyone was like, dropping lines. Everyone was just dead tired. And but yeah, so anyway, so he makes this joke, and I was getting ready. So Michael Benaroya and I were working on putting together this film, Lawless, and we ran into some financial difficulties with the timing of things and pre-sales, and that's when Megan Ellison had come in sort of a hero moment to co-finance with Mike, and she put up a sizable amount of the budget. And And again, ironically, I met Megan through the same guy, Curtis Feeney, who was sort of my Silicon Valley mentor. And that's how I knew Mike's dad. So, and then Megan's mom was his next door neighbor. And so that's how we met her. And she was just getting ready to start Annapurna.
Got
She
it.
had kind of a team around her, and we just really bonded in making Lawless. And that's where I actually formally sort of joined Annapurna there for a minute.
And what year, Rob? When was that?
2012?
Okay.
13? I don't know.
Okay.
We're getting old, man. That's the problem. I don't mean, all the years.
But I think the interesting thing is like streaming hadn't still yet gone full in, right? There was still this
Right.
window
Yeah.
of like, because that's another really great movie, right? Tom Hardy, Shia, that is a really impressive movie. Did you end up not having to pre-sell the heck out of that thing? Like you were able to make it mostly with.
We only pre-sold Canada. And I think it was E1 bought it, but yeah, that was the only pre-sale. Glenn Basner was doing foreign on that. And then of course Weinstein Company bought the movie. And
Was it was not to cut you off, was Glenn Filmation then? Or Filmation wasn't even a thing yet? It was.
No,
Okay.
it was fairly nascent though. It was relatively and Harvey bought the movie off a trailer in Cannes. It was a sort of crazy 3-day, David Glasser and I in the office until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, sort of crazy, event. But yeah, so it was around that time that I was doing at the end of Lawless, and I was talking to Megan about joining up with her, that JC had sent me the script for All Is Lost. And so initially Megan and I had talked about kind of like she'd have her big P.T. Anderson and Catherine Bigelow movies, and then we'd have sort of an independent slate, and like All Is Lost was one of them. There's some great movies. Seven Psychopaths was one of them. If you remember that film.
I do. It's a great movie. Yeah.
So we had this like smaller slate of movies, and then like her and and again Spike Jonze and those films. And anyway, it sort of just from a bandwidth standpoint, it didn't work out to run the two companies in parallel, and so I eventually exited to go back to being a grinder.
Yeah.
But only because they're like all those filmmakers, they have their producers, right? And so you had Megan and you had that, and I just didn't really want to be an executive. That was just not the right fit for me. But she built something incredibly impressive. So I was there for the first couple of films, The Master and Zero Dark 30, and just the beginning of her. But anyway, along that time, so we were going to do All Is Lost at Annapurna. And then, we segued out and ended up having Glenn do foreign sales. And we had some equity lined up from Teddy Schwartzman and from Justin Nappy. And it ended up that Glenn went to Berlin with it, and Universal came in and just said, we'll take everything on international. And then Lionsgate said, well, we'll take domestic. And it was just boom, pre-sold the world and did a bank loan and made a $9.5 million movie, which you just can't get $9 million out of international anymore on these movies.
Did you shoot that? Where did that shoot? On a stage somewhere around?
Rosarita, the Titanic tank.
Got it. Is that in Mexico?
Yeah, Baja. Yeah.
Baja. I mean, obviously another really exciting one in terms of Redford. So J.C. Chandor was right, like only really one actor the whole movie.
Yeah. He really, he did it. We thought the funniest thing was when he sent Neil and I the script, it was 30 pages long. And we're like, the fuck is this? Is this even a movie? And at one point, actually, we had to have the script supervisor break it down to see if it would actually be a 90-minute film. It was like, how would that translate? So yeah, again, it was just a really special film. And I think, that was that period in the market where you could still make these, like Cassian and I always play this game of like, could you make it now? It's like, Lawless, we had a $26 million budget.
No chance. Yeah, no chance.
20 million out of international, right? And in sales, right? It's like it just doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, the shift in the paradigm to streaming, I think even more so like on the international side of streaming, right? They just haven't matured in their markets. And so, yeah, it's left everybody, if you don't have that big US theatrical to drift off of,
Yep.
We're all aggregating content. And, where you used to be able to say, I'll get 500,000, 2 million out of Germany, you're like, just not there anymore,
Right.
For most movies. Obviously there's exceptions, but
Well, it's a good segue, right? It's, could you make it now type measuring of when you look at the market now, obviously streaming has changed everything.
yeah.
What is getting made now for you? I know you're literally in production on something right now. We were chatting about just before we hit record on this discussion.
Yeah.
The things you're working on now, would you have focused on those and made those pre-streaming, changing the economics? Or again, when you can make a $26 million Tom Hardy movie, I guess it's a very different equation to run.
It is. Look, I think the movies, the content, I would still be attracted to the same content. It's just, you used to be able to make these things, the movie you'd make for 10, you're trying to figure out how to make for 5, right? It's like when we did Margin Call in 18 days, it was a shocking thing. People were like, you did that in 18 days? Today, you tell someone you have an 18-day schedule, they're like, yeah, okay, solid. Yeah, they're not even bad enough. 15 is the number where they start going, ooh, that's low, right?
Yeah.
But, the days of 25, 30-day schedules they're very hard to come by in this market because there's just, it's, you either have to be, that 1 or 2 movies that like Searchlight and those guys are focusing on, right? Or, if you're trying to model a film out based on what the market is, right? Like removing the well, we'll sell it to Amazon for $20 million, which isn't a business model, right?
Right.
So
it's a gamble. It's a total gamble.
Totally. And look, if you've got the capital to do it, great. But I think for most of us, we're trying to figure out how to make movies that price to market. But actors still need to be paid. Above the line didn't go down. Union rates continue to go up, right? It's like I always joke that we need a group therapy session, right? Because nobody seems to understand the needs of the other people involved.
Correct.
And so, yeah, I mean, you're just always stretching and struggling and, to make any schedule and any budget work, there's no luxury of more.
Have you seen I'm going through this now. The recording of this is in March 2023. So you've got the banking crisis going on. You've got Netflix again having had the stock issue last year and the streaming economics change and people realizing chasing subscriber growth for nothing other than quote unquote eyeball growth is not really a great business model. And there's a ceiling to it. And so there's been this whole readjusting or reframing of the market. But I think the challenge is, like you said, there's no repricing of how you can make content. There are fixed costs here, and those fixed costs are labor and above the line and the actual materials to make a project possible. Do you think there's going to be less product? And as you look back on your career over the last however many years, I mean, I remember some years of Cannes, where there's just such an unbelievable glutton of content. It feels like there's going to have to be a reduction of the amount of things that actually can get made, unless, again, there's some new finance product that gets introduced and people are willing to throw money at it for whether it's tax benefits or what have you, where they're not trying to really build a business out of it. But otherwise, I have to imagine the amount of volume has to come down. But I also could be totally wrong, because I always wonder, how are there this many things being made every year when you go to a market and you just see booth after booth of content you've never heard of?
Totally. And look, I think the fascinating thing about the movie business is that there will always be an artistic side to it. And you have people that by hook and by crook will figure out how to make their movie, right? I mean, I think that's been over the past 30 years or whatever, since kind of if you go all the way back to early Sundance, the rise of Miramax and like all of that, like anyone can make a movie now, and they will, right? And it's not like a lot of business, a lot of other industries where there's an entry door, like you got to build yourself up. Like if you want to make a movie and you have enough hustle, God damn it, you can get it done, right? So I think for that reason, as much as there's a logic to saying let's make less and make, or like make less bigger, there's just always going to be people out there making content and, you know, writing things and offering them to actors. And, you know, I think the bigger problem that we have as a business is how to get people's attention, right? Because there's this paradox of choice. I mean, the beauty of Blockbuster, right, is that it gave you a finite number of choices. You went in,
Yep.
and it was like, what is available on this shelf, right? And that's what brick and mortar did, where, you know, it's now even me, if I go on demand on my TV and you're just scrolling through, you know, pages of new releases, right? And it's like, well, how do you differentiate? Nobody cares about reviews anymore because there's a million, you know, people
Yeah,
out there.
everyone's a reviewer, everyone's a critic.
And so, you know, and I think even, you know, winning Sundance or whatever, it doesn't have the same gravitas or meaning that it once did. And,
Right.
you know, and then, you know, and I think, so I think it's more, I don't think people will ever make less, because you're not going to be able to tell that 23-year-old with a screenplay that, you know, there's no room at the table, because he'll just build another table. That's what people
Right.
do. Right.
Right.
And so I think it's more, it's like, how do you find a market for your film, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's funny not to cut in, but it's another good segue. So, yeah, I've got a bunch of younger staff members, younger team members, and posed a question at the end of last year during our team offsite, which is film the most relevant medium anymore that it was, right? You have things like A24 who have found an incredible way to make their content so relevant culturally, socially, social media wise, etc. But besides really that platform, which is only a handful of movies a year that they really focus on with that, you know, megaphone that they have,
yeah.
is film as cool and relevant as it is and was the way it was for you and I when we were getting out of school and building companies and building opportunities for ourselves? It was remarkably relevant. Like Sundance was so cool, and independent filmmakers were the most zeitgeisty thing. Whereas now, yeah, there's a handful of them, but obviously television has taken so much of uh, that energy and that relevancy and currency that film used to have, especially independent film. And obviously, studio film is totally pivoted towards $200 million budgets based on IP that pre-existed or really nothing. And so there's this vacuum that feels like it's left from what independent film used to be. A24 has done, you know, obviously hat is so off to just the incredible things that they do and the company that they run. But I'm so curious from your perspective. You use the phrase, how do you get people's attention? To me, it's how can film even get people's attention again when Euphoria or name insert amazing new piece of streaming. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. That is going to keep you living with those characters for so much longer. And that to me is where it becomes another part of the equation of like, okay, what is that next? Who is that next filmmaker? What is that next opportunity? And it's still, I agree with you. I don't think it's going away. I don't think it's necessarily going to shrink in some outsized fashion, because I agree. People will hustle and find ways to get things made. This is not there's not a Series 7 or a medical license you need to go make an independent movie.
That's
And
right.
you deal with a lot of different characters as a result of that barrier not existing. But I'm curious, to you, is it as nearly as relevant as it once was, or the draw that initially brought you in?
Yeah, and I think the answer is emphatically no, right? I mean, you and I came up in the, you know, grew up in that era of like, again, like Sundance, you know, being this thing, right? And
Yeah.
like, you know, Goodwill Hunting, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you know, these two young guys wrote a movie and and like, you know, we all read that in high school and we're like, I want to be those guys, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
The romance of, you know, Kevin Smith making Clerks on his credit cards, right? And like, and it's kind of the problem, I really think, is the death of the theatrical experience. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously,
Mm-hmm.
A24, to your point, has proven that independent film can, you know, still
Yes.
that cultural relevance. But, you know, I think the world has just changed so much from, when we were growing up, like in high school, even college, it was like, what do you want to do on a Friday night? Like, okay, well,
Yeah.
what movies are playing, right? That was a topic of conversation. It doesn't exist now. And I think because there's so much, I think part of the rise of television obviously there's some really great stuff being made, but I also think, going back to that comment about the paradox of choice, there's so much content that, like, when you commit to something, like, you know, with your girlfriend, your spouse, or what have you, when you're like, all right, we're gonna watch 1923,
Yeah.
you now know, like, you don't have to keep having the same conversation. Oh, what are we gonna watch tonight? What are we gonna watch tonight? Right? It's like you can commit to something,
Yes.
right? And it you know, it checks off the next week. You know, like, all right, what are we gonna binge, right? Obviously, that's what House of Cards really changed. It's like also this not
Yes.
necessarily having to wait every week to see something new. Um, and like, you know, at least for me, I found, and then it's like, you know, your friends are watching it. There's something to talk about where,
Totally.
and for movies, if you don't, you know, and you know, obviously he's no longer someone to look up to, but Harvey and what they did at Miramax and then at the Weinstein Company, right, was they knew how to make films, you know, culturally relevant, right? Yeah, I mean, that was part of that marketing machine, and A24 is obviously taking that over, but
Yes.
the rest of the content that's out there, like, you're relying on, you know, I think it comes down to people who like movies, right? But
Right.
that is no longer what it once was, I think.
It's a good segue to the streaming era, which I know you've also, outside of the hustle independent producer model of putting projects together, you've made a number of movies directly with streamers, you know, over the last number of years. You speak to any specifically? I'm happy to go into any that you prefer, but I know you've worked, I believe, Netflix, Amazon, and others over the last number of years.
We have, although I've never had a streamer buy one directly, to be honest with you. It's always
Mm.
through
Mm.
a vertical, or, you know,
Got it.
what have you, and then they sell that SVOD window. Or maybe well, yeah, it's funny. It's like I did have one movie, and I won't say what it was, but we had one film where, you know, this was in the early days of Amazon, and they made a
Yeah.
big offer on this film. And the filmmaker was like, there's no chance that my movie is going to premiere on on fucking Amazon. And
Yeah.
we ended up selling it for less money to a, you know, very classy, traditional, you know, independent distribution company. And look, at that moment in time, I get where he was coming from, you know, the filmmaker, because it was like,
Yeah.
you know, this Amazon thing. Whereas now, it wouldn't
It's
even
one of the
be
first stops.
people would just be
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, great, you know, Amazon, let's do it. But yeah, I mean, it really, you know, it's changed. I think the hard thing with, you know, when it comes to the streamers and what it's done, is that you have this, you know, their entire P&L is different than
Yeah.
what it was when it
It's
was.
that's not a fair, it's not a fair game at all. I mean, Amazon's making content to sell more toilet paper, right? It's a completely different business.
Well, and even Netflix, though, right? Like, they want subscribers, but the P&L for each individual movie
Totally
is
different.
not what vertical entertainment is looking for, which is pure transactional, right?
Right.
You know, how much can I sell this window for, and how, you know, how many DVDs, or how many, direct downloads on Xfinity or iTunes, right? It's like everyone else is playing this game of like, I buy it for X and I
Yep.
need to Y. And
Yep.
you know, whereas, yeah, for the streamers, it's like, well, hopefully this, you know, makes our guys happy, and we're gonna, you know, we're you know, amortizing across all these films, right? And so I think that's where it's really made the way that we used to make films, where even on the international sales side, where it was like, all right, you had estimates of X, you know, you could pre-sell some territories, you know, get some equity or US deal, and you bank it with somebody like, you know, Bondit, and like away you go. But again, you're quantifying every territory, and
Sure.
like everyone's
Sure.
running a model on the value of the movie. And again, the streamers are just not approaching it that way.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think that's been the disconnect that we've all been trying to adjust to, you know. And then, you know, you've seen a massive contraction on the international side of the availability, you know, distributors in territories, and then obviously
Sure.
what they're able to pay. So international, you know, again, unless you have that movie that's going to have that 1,000-screen theatrical release,
Right.
they can, you know, and that typically has to be a genre movie. It's no longer dramas, right? I
Right.
mean, It's like I remember when we did Hate Ship, Love Ship, which was a movie based on an Alice Munro poem, right?
Yeah,
It's like, we sold the UK for 700 grand. I mean, in today's market, you wouldn't get 700 grand out of all of international for that movie.
right, right.
um,
It's also a good segue. I typically ask this question to most folks I chat with on here, which is, in terms of getting things made today, what are you most excited about, and what are you most worried about?
yeah, I mean, look, I think what I'm most worried about is we no longer make new movie stars, right? And so
Mhm.
independent side, we're reliant on, there's like, sure, you've got the stars, but Tom Hardy, as much as I love Tom personally, and he's a pal, but like Tom's not going to come do some of these movies I'm doing, right? He's got a different level at this point in his life, and so we're looking for guys that, um, can get greenlit, right? And so, but we're just not making new ones, right? And so
Yeah,
then I think you see this all the time, whether it was like the Bruce Willis era, but it's like then these guys overexpose themselves because they're doing
yep,
too many movies, and then the value's not there, and then we look for the next guy, and it's just this tough paradigm. So that what worries me is the availability of people to actually come make content, right? Who will attract the financing. And then, I think that's the other thing, because and then everyone has TV shows now, right? And so then it's even their availability, and so that's one of the paradigms that I think we still need to figure out. But look, I mean, every movie is its own journey, right? Its
yeah,
own
yeah,
experience, its own stress and chaos. And I think on every movie, I've made 70 some odd movies, and every time I'm like, I'm not, Jesus, why do I do this? And then you see them,
yeah,
then you see the movie, and you're like, let's do it again,
yeah, 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 yeah. It's seduced and abandoned, right?
Oh,
Is
that's right.
that film constantly?
Yeah.
It's very real. Like, you just constantly get brought back into it.
Yeah. You
In
forget
terms
about
of,
the 1 a.m. stress that you're like, oh my God,
yeah,
and then you go do it again. So
how about the thing you're excited about with it? I mean, maybe you're describing it, right? Is that there's the constant wanting to get back on the horse?
yeah, I mean that's the thing. You never know what look, you read a lot of bad scripts, as I'm sure you do, but every now and again you find something and you see it in your head, and it's fun. It's like, just everything's a startup. It's a new
Right,
journey, new relationships. There's nothing routine or mundane about what we do, right? It's like,
right.
okay, this is going to have its own unique set of personalities, um, and problems and victories and joys, and man, it keeps it fresh, and that's what keeps it exciting. You just never know, right? And you hope that you know you make something great. I always say to people when they're like, "Oh, that movie, I saw that movie, is a piece of shit." And I was like, you might be right, but it took
Yeah,
100 human beings really pouring their heart and soul, working 18-hour days, you know, in months and months and months and months and months to make even a bad movie. So
correct.
appreciate the humanity that went into even a bad movie. And then just really then be grateful when you see something that's fucking great.
Yeah,
Because
no, you're gonna love this. I don't know if we've ever talked about this. When I was in college, my thesis advisor had gone to UT Austin and had been very close with Linklater during the Slacker and Dazed and Confused age, and they actually wrote a bit together on some of those early movies. And so he came to the school I was at out in Chicago, and I got to go to this dinner. He came and did this screening series, and I got to go to this dinner, and I was the most pretentious college film kid ever. Like, so into
oh,
like, all the annoying things that you would say, European cinema obsessively, Ingmar Bergman obsessively. And I asked him some incredibly pretentious question about French New Wave or Bergman or something, and he stopped me, and he's obviously so down to earth in the way he thinks about movies and the way he deals with people and the characters he writes. He just said, "I've learned as much from every movie I've seen that isn't great as I have from every film and filmmaker that is great. And until you can come to understand that and appreciate it, you're not fully rounded yet in the way you look at film." And I remember like being totally taken aback by this person that makes unbelievably exceptional pieces of content, that
right.
he wasn't pretentious about it at all. Like, it was realizing that a piece of shit is equally as difficult to make as something that's exceptional. And there's things to learn from everything you watch and everything you experience and every person you meet. And immediately it just clicked. Oh, this is why this guy is so good at writing something like Dazed and Confused, where you have all these different characters who have a complete different background or backstory coming together in such a real way. It's so true. Yeah, I mean, we all have worked on plenty of bad pieces of content, and you learn just as much from those.
And you come out of it with usually some great stories and relationships. I mean, it's
Correct.
so, you know, that, and I think, look, that's what's always exciting. You never know. I mean, and yeah, that's what keeps you coming back.
Thank you, dude. Thank you for carving out the time. Appreciate it, and we will catch back up soon.
Absolutely, brother. Good to see you.
Thanks, man.
Cheers. Bye.